It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 497 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record where I hold in-depth conversations with today's leading experts in sales, marketing, and leadership 6 days a week. Joining me on Accelerate today is Andy Fowler, co-founder and CTO of Nutshell CRM. Looking forward to talking with Andy because I really want to dive into what the future of CRM systems for small and mid-sized enterprises really looks like, and also talk more about the challenges of implementation and adoption of CRM at the small business level, and how we convince entrepreneurs and sales leaders in the small businesses that there's a lot of value in implementing and using a CRM system the right way. So, Andy Fowler, welcome to Accelerate.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And I guess the first question I'll ask you is, so in your mind, what's the single biggest challenge facing sales reps today?
Oh boy, well there are a whole lot of them, and hang on, let me think about that, because so frequently we hear what sales managers, the problems that they face. You know, we're a CRM company, and we hear a lot from sales managers and the problems that they're finding, and what they'll tell us is the biggest problem that they face is finding good sales reps. I think that reps face a number of challenges, and I'd probably start by saying that dealing with technology and the dozens of tools that are available to them is pretty high on the list.
Dealing with the tools, that's interesting. Okay, so not necessarily anything relative to dealing with the customers per se, but so yeah, I mean, certainly you hear from a lot of people that there's over proliferation, if that's not a redundant saying, of tools in the sales stack these days. I mean, what are you guys seeing going on in that regard?
Well, I think that, this has happened in a whole bunch of different areas. In fact, maybe marketing is even worse than sales when it comes to over-proliferation of tools. But even on the sales side, we just see, so many people that are oversold and over-promised great tools that are going to add a little bit more convenience to their day. And you kind of end up with a little bit of a house of cards and a zillion tools that are going to tell you when someone opens your email and what phone they're on and all kinds of things. And I think that they end up distracting from the actual relationship that's going on. And, of course, it depends what kind of sales rep you are. If you're someone who's, just hammering the phones all day, trying to get in the door, maybe you need those kinds of tools. But, for a lot of the customers that I talk to and a lot of the sales reps that I'm familiar with, they're trying to build relationships and actually form a connection with people at the other end. And we frequently hear that they spend more time typing and tracking and emailing than they do talking and relating.
Well, so that sort of brings up a question, which I ask a lot of times with people, because I talk to a lot of CEOs and founders of tools companies and so on, is, all right, well, yeah, that's their job, making relationships, making connections, absolutely agree. So how does your tool do that, right? I mean, because people sort of look at CRM and say, yeah, CRM really command and control, right? Mm-hmm. What's it do to help the rep at that, what I call the sort of the moment of truth, when they actually have that opportunity then to speak with someone, speak with another human? How's the CRM helping them at that point in time?
Well, there's a couple of things. And, at the heart of it, the core promise of CRM remains what it has always been, in that it becomes a place that tells you and reminds you of what you know about the person on the other end of the phone or the other side of the table. And so if you're diligent about it and you're taking your notes and you're using this as a memory device to remember, the last conversation that you had with somebody and the things that do help you build that relationship, that's where it can be really useful. I think that where people begin to struggle is when they put so many other things in the way there. But one of the metaphors we like to use is, I think it's a Steve Jobs quote. So I'm sorry, I know Steve Jobs quotes are a dime a dozen, but I always loved the metaphor that he described of computers as bicycles for the mind, right? They're not trying to replace us. They're a tool, and they're helping us move faster. They're helping us get things done, but they aren't replacing us. We are still the person on the bicycle doing the hard work, and they just make our job easier. And I think that's when tools work well. It's when we try to replace activities, or when we're using a tool to send emails for us or to make calls for us, and we kind of overindulge there. That's when I think things get problematic.
Well, you use sort of a key word before, and not to not to challenge you per se, but you talk about the promise of CRM, which the implication is that it still largely remains a promise. I mean, do you feel like CRMs are delivering on the promise?
Well, it depends on who you ask, right? The promise I described there was the promise to the rep, right? That this tool is going to help you sell better. It's going to fill in the blanks for you. It's going to help you remember things and not to drop the ball. But the other promise of CRM that maybe people more frequently buy into is that, well, this is a tool to help you, as you said, command and control your reps. And that's an easier promise to deliver. It's pretty easy to put a tool in place that says, here, I can make sure my team is making their 18 calls per day and scheduling all of their follow-ups. But that kind of promise, I think, is a little bit less interesting. And if we're putting on just the owner, our owner hat, and thinking about what's best for the business, it's actually helping out the rep rather than the manager, and helping the manager command and control and check in on those phone calls is one promise of CRM. That's not the one that I think about. I think about the one that's helping the rep and acting as that notebook, as that memory keeper, and building relationships.
So you guys have been out how long with your product?
We launched our product in November 2010.
Wow.
Stood on a stage actually it was the Future of Web Design conference. We launched at a design conference rather than a sales conference, if that tells you anything about how we thought about the market at the time.
So what are some of the key lessons you've learned that maybe weren't obvious when you first got started, or maybe weren't even obvious a year or two ago?
Yeah, well, great question. So my background is more of as a technologist than as a sales rep myself. I've owned my own business before, and so I've done sales, but I spend more time in code than I do selling still. And I would say that what I've learned along the way is that you really need to understand the goal of the person using your product. And that's where I go back. I know I'm repeating myself a bit here, but I go back to thinking about who's using a CRM. Is it a manager who's trying to understand the activities and count and set quotas and all of that, or is it actually trying to deliver value and to increase sales? Because that's really what as owners of companies and as shareholders and everyone, that's what we're really driving toward. That was a little bit of a roundabout answer on what I've learned, though. I learned a whole lot of other things along the way. Well, one of the exciting things we learned was how tightly connected CRM really needs to be. We were the first CRM to really integrate heavily with Google Apps back in 2011, and we saw a great deal of value both for us and driving leads and interested people in our product at the time, and we also saw a lot of value in how it helped out reps. And we continue to find new ways where we think that CRM doesn't stand alone. It has to be well connected to the other tools that you use. And so as we look at this over proliferation of tools, we try to figure out where CRM belongs and where it doesn't.
Well, so one of the questions, I guess, is going back to your formative years as a company, not to you as personal, but CRM space seems awfully crowded and was in 2010. So yet that hasn't stopped a lot of people from, including you and subsequent to that, there's still new entrants coming in, it seems like, all the time. So what is there in the market that you saw that said, there's an opportunity for us, the hype about Salesforce, having 99% of the customers notwithstanding, you obviously saw an opportunity. So what was that opportunity that you saw?
Yeah, well, let me. When we founded the company in 2010, like I said, we launched November of 2010. The three sort of places that we identified that were underserved were in three specific areas. First was design. There were no products that were just well designed, intuitive, easy to use. If you recall, that was the time when the iPhone was rocketing into popularity, and people suddenly expected a lot more sort of consumerification of business applications. Right. Salesforce at the time and even still was ugly and kludgy and easy to use because it was a moderate improvement on Oracle and SAP, which are ugly and kludgy and terrible to use. So we firstly and most importantly believed that design was just an undervalued part of business software. We also saw, and this might sound a little bit geekier, but you're
entitled. You said you're the technical guy. You can be as geeky as you want.
Well, fair enough. Well, the other thing that frustrated us about the market at the time was, even Salesforce was charging for API access, and CRM is kind of the most sensitive and important data that your business owns, and we felt that API access and making sure that customers still retained ownership of the information they put in a CRM, especially since we had all gone to the cloud by that point, but making sure that ownership and accessibility of data in the product was important to us. So I think Salesforce at the time was charging still hundreds of dollars a seat if you wanted an API license, and so that was another core piece of it. And the third was mobile, and we were the first CRM to Android. We launched in 2010 on iOS, and that remains a super important part. I think we're no longer the only company who realizes that. Many companies and probably the majority of our competition are aware that mobile is incredibly important. But in 2010, it was a wide open space.
So who's your target market? I mean, what's the ICP for you guys?
Yeah, no, and this has been a really interesting exercise that we've been on probably for the last 2 years now. When we launched, we pretty much just said we are the CRM for small business, and because we were well designed and we had these other sort of value propositions, that was is really as far as we cared to narrow. Now, to your point, the market is crowded, and there's a lot of other players on the field. For us, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, sort of sales reps who actually care about relationships. There are a lot of companies that are now inbound, very high volume of transactional leads that are coming in through a website. And, those companies are interesting, and there are CRMs that work well for them. HubSpot, of course, being one that's pretty high on the list. And in a way, our company kind of is one of those. We have a lot of inbound leads. Yep. But our ideal customer and the ones that we love to talk to, in fact, the ones that we know well, are the ones who build a long-term relationship with their customers. They may sell to the same customer over and over again. And in a way, these may sound like the less sexy companies out there, but they are reps who are still jumping in their car and driving out to get lunch with someone. I spoke with a customer a few weeks ago who walked me through his process of how he looks at Google Maps and still does his sort of traveling salesman problem. And those kinds of companies who have a long running sales process, they're outbound, they're not just sitting there collecting a bunch of leads from a form on a website. Those are really interesting to us because they have a lot of unique challenges, one of which is just managing a sales process that could be lasting 6 or 9 or 12 months.
Sure. Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, it's funny. I was actually just talking to somebody just an hour or so ago, VP level sales in the Bay Area at a tech company, and I was telling him a story, and he found hard to believe, and I sort of tell the story just to illustrate how there is this bubble that the tech industry operates within, which they think all companies are alike. I was talking about a company I spoke to a VP at a few months ago. 100-year-old company, I think 60 sales reps, mostly in the field. Their big initiative for 2017 was to install their first CRM system. And he found that unbelievable and to some degree, right? But and I was saying, well, yeah, but that's the world out there, right? I mean, that's part of my impetus for doing this show and bringing people like yourself and other CEOs and technical founders on to talk about their sales tools and so on is help expose what's going on to the people that aren't using those, that aren't in the know, so to speak, and take advantage of simple tools like email tracking, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it's phenomenal to hear that kind of story. In a way, sometimes you realize how the industry is flipped on its head. You'll look at a technology startup with maybe 5 or 6 employees, and they've got their Salesforce installation, and they've got this huge stack of sales and marketing tools, and their pre-revenue. Right. They've got this whole thing set up and ready to go. They've got their SDR and AE playbook all mapped out. And then you talk to customers like ours, and they're companies that are manufacturing goods, and they're selling to other businesses, and they're 100-year-old companies, and they have well-defined, they're terrific sales reps. They've got a process nailed down, but they just never have had the impetus, or maybe they haven't been inside this bubble that says you need 30 tools to be able to sell. The truth is, technology can help them, but they don't think about that being the first thing that they do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly technology can help. To your comment, how much technology they need. Yeah, probably not as much as everybody thinks they do. I mean, so one of the conundrums, and this is, for listeners that probably roll their eyes when I say this, but because I say it all the time, is there is no proof that I've seen that's come across in terms of research or anything else saying that this huge infusion of sales technology and marketing technology have improved productivity.
Yeah, it's it's an interesting thing, and you can go to our website or to the website of any of our competitors and see research that has been done on the ROI of CRM, and there's a lot of different ways to look at it. But I certainly think that there's a lot more sort of emphasis on technology than there is on human relationships. And our objective in our technology is to help with human relationships rather than to give you a stack of 300 tools that are going to save you 3% of time during the day. And
I love that, because I literally, right before you and I jumped on this interview, I was just giving a webinar for a sponsor company, and that's exactly what I was talking about. Is your process should exist solely to serve to my mind, serve the purpose of making that moment of interaction between your sales rep and another person higher value and more impactful. And if your sales process doesn't do that, then it's the wrong process.
Right.
But we seem to be sacrificing, to some degree, I think, at least within certain segments, sacrificing this idea of the human relationship for the sake of the technology.
Right. And all of these things, and the reason we put these kinds of tools into place is still important. We need to measure our sales team, and we need to make sure they're doing their jobs, and we need to get rid of the ones who aren't and to promote the ones who are. And that still is a premise of CRM, and that's the reason why companies do find it and put it to good use. But in my mind, that's a secondary purpose of the product. And the first one is to help reps build a rapport and relationships and trust with their customers and their potential customers.
Well, okay. So let's dive into a nutshell a little bit. So first question, where's the name come from?
It's a great question. My colleague Guy came up with the name, and it is. Yeah, I wish I could take credit for it, but the name was available at the time. Like I said earlier, I'm from Ann Arbor here, and I actually remember the time sitting on the patio at Zingerman's, kind of a world famous deli, world famous deli here in Ann Arbor.
Been there.
And Guy introduced me to this idea, and he had the name all ready to go at the time. And it may have been the name itself that sold me on building this company, but it's a terrific way that I think represents our brand of being down to earth about, it represents the point of CRM, that it's still the place where you put things in nutshell, but it's not, this sort of data science, massive piece of technology that's trying to, control your sales process.
Right. Now, interestingly, I completely off topic here, but there seems to be somebody in New Zealand with a Nutshell CRM as well.
We've encountered those folks occasionally. I think it's sitting on a file. It sits on top of
FileMaker. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's sort of this
Asia Pacific's largest FileMaker developer, though.
Exactly. Yeah, I've never actually spoken to anyone there, and the other Nutshell out there about 5 years ago was a salon management tool called Nutshell, and there's nothing new under the sun.
All right. Well, I like the name. You can see everything in a nutshell. I like that. So again, back to your point about the CRM helping people with the human side of the business, the human to human interaction. The moment of truth, right? When you've invested time and effort. So how are you helping the reps with that?
Well, one of the biggest things, like I said, is that, a CRM should be the sales rep's notebook. It should be the thing that jogs your memory and reminds you of what you've said. And because it's, more than a notebook, it can do that in a few other ways. So something that's important to our product is that that Nutshell connect not only to the sales rep and what they're saying to a customer, but to support tools and to things along those lines. So, for instance, when I pick up the phone to talk to one of our customers today, I of course open them up in Nutshell, and we we, as most technology companies do, have our own massive suite of technology, and we talk to our customers through tools like Intercom and Zendesk and Olark, and we have a lot of different ways that we talk to our customers. So I open up Nutshell though because it helps me see every one of those conversations in a single timeline. We weren't the first to do this, but I think we've done it particularly well. We use sort of a Facebook newsfeed style interface to sort of sum up the history of conversations with a customer. So before I pick up the phone and talk to someone, I can see that they spoke to Kristen about a problem last week, and that they talked to Sarah when they first set up their account, and I can sort of see all of those conversations rolled up. So I'm not just looking at my personal notebook about a customer, but I'm seeing essentially the notebook of everyone else that my team used.
Interesting. So when you're talking to a potential customer, SMB customer, and getting back to the story I told before about in the world at large, most companies still don't have CRM systems. What's the sales process for you? I mean, there's an educational component there. I think that is a little different than a SaaS company that's selling into a tech or tech-enabled company. There's a certain understanding of CRM. When you're selling into sort of greenfields like that, what are sort of the keys that you found?
Well, it's the same kind of thing that I think probably many of your listeners think about. It's building a relationship with the person at the other end of the phone. And what I love about our customer base is that nearly half the time, the person we're talking to who's looking for a tool like ours is the owner of the business, and they have a wealth of knowledge about what their business does and who their customer is and how they operate, and they are incredibly adept people at the work that they do, whether it is installing roofs or building the cryogenic brake linings that they do, or selling the laboratory equipment that they do. Right. They are domain experts in that. And what we get to come along and do is introduce them to how software can help them with their with understanding their customers and keeping track of those relationships better. So I think I've kind of danced around your question a little bit there, but when we talk to the owners of small businesses, we're talking to them about technology and what our product does, but the exciting part of it is learning about what they do and who their customers are.
So how does a company like that come to the understanding that they need a CRM system? I mean, they've been, to your point earlier, and certainly understand, they've been operating just fine. And are they saying, look, gosh, we want to grow sales and something seems to be standing in the way, or we're having a hard time keeping track? We are growing quickly and we have a hard time keeping track of everything. What's sort of the impetus that you're finding?
Yeah, very frequently, and there's a few different angles, and obviously the two kinds of customers that we talk to, the two kinds of leads we talk to are those who are either using a competitive CRM and they're just fed up with it, and that happens quite a bit, or there's the companies that aren't on a product, and that's the majority still. They're on email and they're on spreadsheets, and you know what? I love email and I love spreadsheets, and those are great tools when you're one person, but where they break down is when you go from one person to two. No CRM will ever beat just one sales rep having their own spreadsheet in front of them that's perfectly tuned to the way they operate. That's just it's a tool built for the job. But as soon as you need to add the second person to your team, that's where those tools begin to break down. So that's usually when an owner has sort of felt that pain for usually a couple of months, and they've tried to scale around it, or to ask people to email their spreadsheets in and do all kinds of things, when they realize that those tools that work well for one person at a time don't work well when suddenly you're all collaborating around your sales. Well,
for somebody who's listening to the show, who is either a sales leader at a smaller company, or CEO, entrepreneur, what are sort of the evaluation criteria they should use for CRM? Because gosh, there's a default position, right? Let's go buy Salesforce. Like the company I talked about that had a 100-year-old company were buying Salesforce, and my first thought was, it seemed like they were buying sort of a native implementation of it, which most people are finding value through Salesforce through bolt-on applications through the App Exchange. So it's like, gosh, what was the process they went through to make that decision, right? Because that seems like that's going to be a lot of work.
Right.
So what are the criteria they should use in your mind when evaluating this type of investment?
Yeah, I think I already shared I stood on the soapbox earlier about this, but we talked to so many, small technology companies that have reached for Salesforce because they hear it's the one that they're going to need when they're 100 people or when they're scaling to 1,000 people, right? Where we find a lot of rapport is when we talk to customers who understand, scaling the mountain that you're on, and that it doesn't make sense to buy the tool that Hewlett Packard or that Dell uses, but to find the tool that works for your team. And I think there's this sort of attraction to the tool that Silicon Valley is using, and that just doesn't work for a small business. And I think we all kind of like the idea of using the tools that others use, but I would say find the tool that just fits you like a glove. Find something that solves the exact problem that you have, not the problem you expect to have 12 months from now, because you'll know more about that problem then.
Oh, interesting. So do most of your customers do a free trial?
They do. Yep. We have a 14-day free trial. Most people sort of evaluate and decide very quickly in the first couple of minutes. I'm frequently impressed by how quickly people understand whether the product that we've developed sort of matches the unique need that they have, and whether it sort of fits their team and their style of working. And I mentioned earlier that a lot of people come from spreadsheets. We actually took that as a design cue, and we built a few different parts of our product. So we have pages that if you're comfortable looking at that Excel view, and that's kind of the world that fit well for you, you'll feel comfortable in Nutshell, because it was designed from someone who's coming from that piece of software.
Interesting. All right. So a couple questions about the CRM market. So as I said before, early in the conversation, there's no shortage of companies in that space.
You bet.
We're now starting to see in the sales stack space in general, like in the sales development platform space and others, some consolidation taking place.
Yeah.
So what do you see and forecasts are happening in the CRM space?
Oh boy. I'm not much of a prognosticator, so I don't know too much about where it's going. But what I've seen so far, I've been impressed. We watch very carefully the product Relate IQ. In my mind, they were one of our more fierce competitors for quite some time, and Salesforce bought them up a few years back. And the reason I admired that product so much is that it actually had a pretty similar thesis to ours, and that the relationships are what mattered, and that tools can help you manage those relationships, but that spending all of your time trying to manage to quota and everything else can be a bit distracting. So that was a product that we watched closely, and Salesforce, from my understanding and from what we've seen, sort of gobbled that product up, not just to use it in the small business side, but because enterprises could also use that same kind of technology and that same approach to relationship building. There's as you said, our space is pretty competitive. There's a lot of folks who have staked out a position in the ground. I have to admire what ProsperWorks has done with Google. They have hitched their wagon very, very closely to Google Apps. And so if you are a business that really lives and breathes Google Apps, I think that ProsperWorks fits nicely in that ecosystem. They even use the Google material design framework, and it's it's their way of trying to create a piece of technology that doesn't feel foreign, that fits you like a glove if you are inside of that Google world. And I think that's pretty interesting. But there are a lot of businesses that don't use Google or don't think of Google as their sort of platform of choice. So be interested to see what else there is in that area.
And so last question is, future of CRM in general, where do you think it's going?
Great question. I think there's going to be a couple of angles. Base CRM's clearly staked out that they think the future of sales is in data science and AI and machine learning and all of that. And even Salesforce, they put a slightly friendlier face on it with Einstein. A lot of companies are kind of, I would say, drinking that Kool-Aid. That takes me back to my rant that, sales is still about building relationships, and that data can only take you so far. So what I would be looking for and be eager and more intimidated by when it comes to competition is products that really understand how to understand the relationships that you're building with your customers rather than the data about your customers. And Yeah, I don't know that anyone has well figured that out yet. And actually, maybe the most interesting piece there was Microsoft's purchase of LinkedIn. And
right.
I don't think it's a perfect way to understand relationships, but it's certainly the platform where all of us are on and that knows about a lot of our relationships. So there's surely going to be more coming out of that.
Oh yeah, there has to be. I mean, it's like if there's not, why did they do it?
Yeah, we were, as you've probably seen, a few years back, LinkedIn used to have a terrific API that opened up a lot of small business CRMs like ours to their network, and they shut it down. And we and Insightly and Base and Capsule and all of those guys were all kind of kicked out. And Microsoft and Salesforce were the two that were still allowed into that walled garden. And hopeful for that to change still someday, but we'll have to see where that goes.
Yeah. Don't hold your breath on that one.
I'm not.
All right. Well, good. Well, Andy, we're just about run out of time. So tell folks how they can find out more about Nutshell and contact you.
Okay, great. Well, no, I appreciate your time, Andy. And folks are interested in learning about Nutshell and what we're up to here, it's nutshell.com. We have a free trial there. And if anyone is interested in talking to me directly, I'd love to talk to you. This is, like I said, I spend more time in code these days and looking to spend less time doing that and more time with our customers. So you can get a hold of me at andy@nutshell.com. And I'd love to hear from your listeners.
Great. All right. Well, Andy, thanks again. And friends, thank you for spending this time with me today. Remember, come back, join me again tomorrow. Listen to another one of our great episodes, great interviews with experts like Andy Fowler. Until then, appreciate if you get a chance, go to iTunes, subscribe to this podcast, leave a review, or you can do this right on your phone. We want to hear what you have to say. So please help us out there. So again, thanks again for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.